that you have joined us. It takes a few minutes for me to get confirmation from Zoom that we have actually gone live. So I am thankful that you are here. I'm going to keep stalling for a few seconds until it tells me. We are also live on Instagram just to be different. So friends, I'm so glad that you have joined us, that you are present for another episode of the Chosen Aftershow. The Chosen Aftershow is an idea that came up out of my desire to talk about television. So that's where we are today. Those of you who aren't aware, The Chosen is a show that debuted last year. It is a show that is a dramatic telling of Jesus and the world in which he lives and does his ministry. We have stories of the people who encountered Jesus and how they are impacted by him. My name is Lance Marshall. I am one of the pastors at the First United Methodist Church of Fort Worth in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm here with my colleague, my friend, Pastor, Reverend, Dr. Zhenya, Gurina-Rodriguez, and we are here to talk about episode 2. So I'm so glad that you are here. I want to remind you that we are live streaming on Facebook. That is the easiest way for the majority of y'all to watch and participate. We have about a 20-second lag, but if you type a question in on the Facebook comments, I'll be able to see it and respond. So please consider doing so. We would love to hear your questions, your thoughts, and have you be a participant in the conversation. So Zhenya, first off, thank you for doing this with me. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm enjoying it.
All right, so I'm going to begin. We go by segments, and segment 1 is recap. Let's recap this episode. The episode opens in Chinnereth, nearly 1,000 years before the events of our main story. The Jewish community gathers for Shabbat, a sacred meal honoring family, community, and God. Back in our main timeline, characters gather for Shabbat as well, the timeless tradition remaining essentially unchanged for a millennia. After being healed last episode by a mysterious stranger, Mary of Magdala appears to be healthy and well and re-engaged in community life. A shocked Pharisee sees her and reports back to Nicodemus and others that his exorcism must have worked after all. Tax collector Matthew has gone to see Quintus to verify the relief Quintus gathered to Simon regarding his taxes owed to the Roman occupiers. Matthew boldly claims he believes Quintus made a bad deal, an audacious act that deepens his betrayal of his fellow Jews and should have gotten him murdered for disrespecting Quintus. At a local bar, Simon and Andrew continue to disagree over Simon's plans to betray his fellow Jewish merchants to Quintus for tax evasion. A religious council forms to investigate the report of Mary's deliverance from demonic oppression. They believe a miracle has occurred. Nicodemus himself seeks out Mary to confirm what he thought was impossible. Back at his tax collecting booth, Matthew is recovering from the wounds inflicted by an angry member of the community. In conversation with his centurion guard Gaius, he reveals that he is disowned by his own father over his participation with the Romans. Speaking with her friends, Mary reveals that she is preparing to host her own Shabbat dinner. They are shocked and pleased to hear of this massive transformation in her life. Mary herself is a bit anxious in taking this huge step toward returning to a normal, respectable Jewish life. Nicodemus encounters Mary in the street to verify her healing. She has no recollection of him or his efforts at exorcism. She reveals it was the mysterious stranger who healed her, without sharing his name or seeking credit for what he had done. At home, Simon's wife Eden perceives that he is up to something that deeply troubles him. He can't hide from his wife. His revealing that he will miss Shabbat to work goes beyond troubling her. It tears at the very trust at the foundation of their relationship. As night falls, the community prepares for Shabbat. Matthew tries to muster the courage to join his own family for dinner, but turns away from their door in shame. Nicodemus presides over a rich and prestigious dinner facilitated by servants with gold utensils and the finest supplies. A private conversation with his wife reveals he continues to struggle with the tension between his religious station and his earnest search for God. Across town, Mary meticulously prepares her own humble Shabbat dinner. Unlike Nicodemus's dinner, which is attended by the highest tiers of society, hers is open to the lame, the blind, and the lonely. Two strangers, James and Thaddeus, arrive and say that they had been told this would be a good place to come. As Mary begins to stumble through the ritual, there is a knock at the door. Mary opens it to reveal the mysterious stranger who had healed and redeemed her. At the table, he is asked his name, and he says, Jesus of Nazareth. As Mary reads the liturgy, we are shown Shabbat dinners across town, Mary's, Nicodemus's, and Eden's. All alone is Matthew. Having been rejected by his family and too ashamed to ask for forgiveness, he is sharing his Shabbat dinner in the alley with a stray dog. Simon leaves his family Shabbat, a place of love and care, and goes to the sea to meet with the Roman soldiers, hoping to complete his underhanded deal to betray his kinfolk for his own gain. Episode 2. Zhenya, our next segment. What sticks out when you think about episode 2? It's been a while since you watched it. What do you remember? What sticks out to you about that episode?
Shabbat was a big deal.
Yeah, like, it's not just dinner.
Yeah, like you like everybody's involved. Like there is not a single person there who is Jewish who is not involved in one way or another in Shabbat, and it's a big deal. And I mean, it's a big deal in the Bible. So I'm glad that the show kind of showed how this takes the community. Like this involves everyone.
City shuts down. This is Odessa on a Friday night. Do you know what that means, Zhenya?
No, I have no idea what that means.
All right, all the rest of us watching, we know what it means. Odessa on a Friday night. There ain't nothing going on because it's high school football, Zhenya. High school football is what runs Friday night in Texas.
From where I come from, Odessa is a huge city port in the south of Ukraine, and it's a resort town, and nothing shuts down there on Friday night. So what you just said made no sense to me.
Okay, well, it's not a high school football team in the Permian Basin. Got it. Understood. So in Texas, things shut down on Friday night because it's high school football. Here, everything's shut down for Shabbat. It claims the entire community. It's beautiful in a way. The community is gathered together, and it honors family, community, and God. It's a really big deal. Yeah, what sticks out to me is the power of that. It's not just a dinner. It's real ritual. It's real tradition, and that has power and meaning. And it got me thinking about the most sacred rituals in my own life. And so, one of them is we have on New Year's Day, every New Year's Day for lunch, we always eat, and I'm sure you know this, Zhenya, this is an old Russian tradition, black-eyed peas and collard greens. Is what we always eat for lunch on New Year's Day. Y'all too, right?
No.
It's black-eyed peas for good luck and collard greens for money. It's a blessing for the new year. That's what we always eat. July 3rd is the anniversary of my bone marrow transplant. And so ever since 2012, we always gather back at the lake. My parents live on a lake. We always go to the lake house. Our friends are there, family's there. It's a big cookout. We just celebrate life. We celebrate being alive. These are the rituals and the traditions that shape us, that form us, that mark the passage of time. And the identity is family. Zhenya, what about you? Are there any rituals or traditions that you can think of that carry that kind of weight?
So yeah, the first one that came to my mind was something that we did with my family, and it's something that every single Russian home does. So I'm pretty sure you do it as well, Lance.
Turn it back on me.
Every Easter morning breakfast has hard-boiled eggs that are painted. We don't have egg hunts, so we don't, like, candy is not present. It's like real, chicken eggs. They're hard-boiled, and then we have an egg fight. So everybody gets an egg around the table, and then you have to hold it like this is what I found on the desk to show it. You kind of have to hold it like with your fingers, not like this to protect it, but kind of like very open. And then we like fight, and you get like one hit, and the person whose egg doesn't crack wins. So then you go to the next person, and then you get an egg winner whose egg didn't crack during the egg fight on Easter Sunday morning. Isn't that a beautiful tradition? And I have no idea where it came from, but we all do that. Is
this pre-church? Is this post-church? It's before church?
Pre-church, it's breakfast. Yeah, that's how you crack your boiled eggs for breakfast. Like, you don't hit them on the table. You have to like hit another egg. But there is like way to cheat. So like we already know how the cheating thing works. So there's all kinds of rules about the egg fight. Anyway.
Does the same person win in your family, or is it a fair fight?
Well, no, depends on the egg. Like you have to choose the lucky egg, It's
okay, all right. I didn't know if it was like, and Uncle Bill always wins.
No, it depends on the egg, really. There is nothing you can do.
So again, the power of ritual and tradition to shape us and form our families. That's what I saw when I saw. That's what sticks out to me when I think about this episode, the importance of Shabbat. And a reminder, again, why it goes back to this tension that we have right now in Simon's character. What's Simon doing? He's breaking Shabbat. And so one of the things that we've explained over the course of the first episode is that has, legal ramifications, right? It's against not paying taxes on that catch, is against the Roman occupiers law. It's against their law. But like, you can see how that kind of act now rips at the fabric of their families. I mean, look, what does it say to Eden when I am leaving our table Shabbat, and how meaningful that is. So you start to understand like the real conflict that it takes when you start it's like saying, I'm not going to crack eggs with for our family on Easter this year. Well, what are you doing? That's what we do. That's our thing. Yeah. Right. And so that sticks out to me. Okay. So next segment, something surprising, something that we didn't expect to see, something that we saw in the show that we didn't know was going to be there. And that meant something to us. What really stuck out to me comes back again to that conversation between Simon and his wife, Eden. The conversation they're having, again, this is leading up to Shabbat. At the very end of the episode, we're actually seeing him leaving Shabbat, but we're being told in the course of the episode that this is going to happen. He's telling her. And what sticks out to me, what was really surprised me, was, again, the humanity of it. This isn't a story that we have in the Bible. This is the creators of the show imagining these people as fully fledged characters. But the thing that happened in the show is something that's happened in the lives of our congregation so many times. And that is, one spouse is saying, what's wrong? And the other spouse is saying, nothing. It's going through a hard time right now. And whether that's work, a lot of times it's work, right? Or it's family or something out. And then the other spouse wants to talk about it. And then the first spouse is like, you know what? They just shut it down. Just let me get through it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to acknowledge it. And that's such a human thing. That's happened in my family before. I know that's happened in so many marriages in our congregation. That happens all around the city of Fort Worth today. And to see it happening in Capernaum 2,000 years ago was just incredibly humanizing. And so this constant human need to be vulnerable with our loved ones, to be vulnerable with our spouses. And you're probably this way watching the episode, Zhenya. When you're watching them go, you're like, you're ruining it, dude. Like, this is going to be a huge problem for you. We see that as the audience, right? Yeah. Like that, man, where does lying lead to? More lies. Where does hiding stuff from your wife lead to? Bigger problems. And you're just kind of watching this person fall into like the depth. He's not only not working with the Romans, he's fighting with his brother. He's lying to his wife. And I'm just seeing that. I'm like, Simon, just tell the truth. Simon, just come out. Just trust. Just be vulnerable. So that surprised me. I wasn't expecting to see that kind of humanity in the show. Zhenya, what's something that surprised you? What's something you didn't expect to see at all?
Oh, I love the hair salon. Last week you brought up the bar. This week I'm like blown away by the hair salon. They serve wine, and I'm just watching it and thinking, and why not?
Why not? Yeah, perfect. Men aren't allowed in, by the way. We had no idea. I didn't know that was going on. Still not allowed in.
Yeah, and then you may have noticed that they kind of circled the camera a couple of times through those pictures on the walls of there's like two women. It's like,
yes.
It's almost like having, you a supermodel posters with this gorgeous hair, with shiny and everything hanging in the salon, and you kind of come in and it's like, well, that's what I want.
Is that what that was for? Do you know what they were?
I did some image Googling because I'm like, gosh, they just look so familiar. And I didn't find like those were, replicas probably created for the show. So it's not like they just really like took and copied something. But the style reminds me a lot of these frescoes and paintings of very rich women that were found in the rich homes in Pompeii. Because of the volcano stuff, those houses are really preserved very well. And we have a lot of art from there. And like the way they're positioned, their face expression.
The style of the time, yeah.
Jewels, like all of those fancy braids, like that is like this rich Roman, whatever, hairstyle with all of the shebang that comes with it. And that just hangs in this, salon somewhere in like rural Capernaum where Mary's trying to get her hairdresser.
The barbershop where I take
yeah.
the barbershop where I take my second oldest son literally has pictures on the wall, and you go like, I want the 12. Like, like I want to give him the 12, and I want the 3 for the younger boy, and the bigger boy gets the 12. And that's what it looked like. It's like, give me that one. I thought that really stuck out of me. That was very surprising.
Yeah, but this is not the kind of women that come to that salon. You know, the women that are in the pictures have their own slaves doing their hair in their palace.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Anything else? Anything else that stuck out or was surprising when you're going through?
Well, I kind of keep my eye on Matthew a lot. I'm really fascinated by his character, and what cracked me up, how he was able to check the transaction history of Simon, you know, and his finances. I'm like, do you have like access to the to his tax return or bank?
Literally.
Like, this is a cash society. Like, you can just go and track where Simon spends money unless you're like see him somewhere. And Matthew doesn't seem to be very involved in the community. So for him to know where Simon goes and where he drinks and where he eats and who he hangs out with, that's kind of
what he's up to. Yeah, I don't know. That one didn't trouble me as much. I think because being in the small town, like I feel like, you know, because Matthew seems to be very scrupulous about collecting money, obviously. Yeah. And so maybe he's gotten wind that Simon's a gambler, you know, or particularly because it sounds like they've requested extensions. So I don't know. It's definitely Simon's interesting. I mean, Matthew's an interesting character. I was watching some of the commentary between the creator of the show and some consultants they had. And they said that they chose to give Matthew, the character in this show, some characteristics of autism spectrum disorder. That was a creative choice. And I wasn't sure if that was what they were trying to do, if that was an actor's choice, etc. And they chose to deepen that character's reality in that way. So interesting choice by the creators. Again, something that's not a concept that exists in the biblical world. Yeah. But interesting choice by those creators. So speaking of things to know, next segment is things to know. Things that you need to understand, that you need to comprehend, that you need to think about in order for the conversation to make sense. Zhenya, you start. What is something that is a thing to know that you think needs to make sense for people to understand this episode?
Yeah, so there is this very quick conversation between Nicodemus and his wife when they look at that tapestry. And Nicodemus asks his wife if she knows who Hasmoneans are that represent that style and that time. And she's like, well, tell me. And I almost like fell off the couch because it's like, first of all, she just in the episode before that, she has this deep theological discussion with him about the character of God, and now she doesn't know who Hasmoneans are. Like, that is insane, because that is the biggest like event in the history of Israel, right before the Romans. It's very recent. It's on. I don't know. It's like a Russian would tell you, yeah, tell me about communists. I don't know who they are. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so these were the people, they were Jewish family, Jewish brothers. There was a succession of them, and their father was also involved, that reclaimed the independence for Israel, and they sanctified the temple again because the bad guy sacrificed their pig on the temple in the temple in Jerusalem.
The desolation of abomination.
Yes, so the book of Daniel talks about it. The whole like, that was huge, and for her not to know, first of all, she doesn't recognize the style or the pattern. Come on, and then she asks him about who these guys are. Like, no, right. They would definitely. She would be familiar with that period in the history of their country, and that's what they were looking forward to. Like, the next Hasmonean-like rebellion would free them from Romans. Like, that was it. You know, that's what they were expecting. So
yeah, that's the difference between their expectations of Jesus versus who Jesus actually is. I want to throw out that your obvious favorite segment is nitpicking, because you'll get to a little bit of nitpick in every segment. Okay, so things to know. Something that you need to know to understand this episode is the idea of what a brief comment that Mary makes to Nicodemus, which is his time for men to know has not yet come. His time to men to know has not yet come. And so a regular comment that I receive in teaching the Bible and in Bible studies is that a lot of times Jesus will do a miraculous work in someone's life, exactly like what happens in Mary's life. And then he'll have some sort of comment to them. Don't tell people about this. Don't let this out. And there's always a huge question of why, because our entire fundamental understanding of Christians is that the story is to be told, to share who Jesus is, what Jesus is about, Jesus's purpose, his good news, etc. So the idea that Jesus himself is saying something like, don't tell people about me, makes no sense. But you need to remember that Jesus understands that at some point when word gets out about him, the countdown to the cross begins. And he's got a lot of teaching, a lot of work, a lot of ministry to do at that point. And so one of the things he's trying to do is help manage and set the expectations of who he is in his ministry in the world. And so why would he say his time has not yet come? When he has a purpose in understanding how people come to better know who he is and what he's about. So the time has not yet come for this to be a big public thing. Another thing I want to point out really quickly, and this may be obvious to some people, but Zhenya, how come they did this? I'll just ask you, how come they just didn't call him Jesus Christ? Why didn't he say, "Oh, my name is Jesus Christ" at the table?
Well, Christ is not his last name or his daddy's name or his nickname. That is more of a description of his role as the one who is sent by God. And just like you said, at that time when we meet Jesus in the show, there is so much more to his story. And in fact, his story will be complete on the cross and the resurrection afterwards. The healings, the miracles, the exorcism, all of that has no meaning to it until the death and the resurrection. And that is where he reveals that he is Christ, which means he's anointed by God to fulfill this mission. So it would be too early in the show. If you would drop
Christ is his title, it's not his name. And so it's easy, it's completely understandable to not realize that. We talk about Jesus Christ all the time, and we live in a world people are called by two names. His name would have been called, actually interesting as well, not Jesus. So at that table in that time, he of course would not have introduced himself as Jesus. The just sound doesn't even exist in the language he spoke. He wouldn't have been called Jesus. He would have been called Yeshua. So he would have introduced himself as Yeshua from Nazareth. We get Jesus because the New Testament is written in Greek, and we get from Greek into English and the J sound. That's how we get it. His language, it would have been Yeshua. So in some Messianic Jewish communities today, that's how they'll refer to him. We call him Jesus, and the showrunners made that choice knowing the audience, but when he spoke his own name out of his mouth, it would have been the name Yeshua. So, okay, the best segment. What did Edwin and Elizabeth think? Edwin is Zhenya's husband. Yeah. Elizabeth is my wife. What did Edwin and Elizabeth think about this episode? Edwin first. Any comments from Edwin?
Yeah, so we didn't watch it together. He watched it first and then I watched it separate. But when I asked him, so what? He's like, well, nothing happened. And then he said,
no fighting. There are no flips.
Well, there is like no development of anything, Shabbat, nothing happened. That's supposed to be that way. He did like though the jokes. He said the dude at the table was funny. It's the Barnaby character. He kind of like breaks the awkward silence with a lot of jokes. So he liked him.
You like Barnaby? Yeah, that's a perfect transition because when Barnaby says, I guess something good can come out of Nazareth, and then Jesus winks, that destroyed my wife. And by destroyed, I mean like won her heart. That is, she's literally like, my version of heaven is being greeted by Jesus with a wink. Like she didn't know that's what she wanted. And then she saw it and she's like, that's what I want. That's what heaven is Jesus seeing you and being like, and she's like, it wasn't like a romantic thing. She was like, it is so, she's like, I like that guy. I love that guy. So I saw a couple of y'all post that in the comments already. Jesus's wink was a very strong impact because 2 or 3 people have already mentioned they love the wink. So Elizabeth loved the wink. She was all about it. That is her version of heaven. Okay, so the best segment, the key segment, nitpicking. Nitpicking. Pick some nits. I'm gonna go with the littlest one. One, the pictures on the hair salon was one of mine. it just seemed too much like something that we do. It's like, put some pictures up. Another one I'm going to discuss, I'm going to do a deep dive on Shabbat dinner, but one of the prayers that they say, I'm a woman of valor who can find. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. It's got Shet Yehil. And apparently, according to my research, that prayer became a part of Shabbat ritual in the 17th century, which meant they were almost 3,000 years early on that when they showed it at the beginning of the show. Almost 3,000 or 2,700 years off on that being a part of Jewish ritual. So I'm not obviously an expert, but that's an interesting piece of data for me. That's certainly a big nit if they're 3,000 years off on something. The other was Eden slicing cucumbers with the sharpest knife I've ever seen on a cutting board. So, like, that was she's preparing for Shabbat dinner, and she's got an 8-inch chef's knife. She's got good knife skills, and she's on a cutting board. That cracked me up. And so I think I think they kind of brought her own from her own Farberware and was just doing it. I don't think that was right to the time. So that's my nits. Zhenya, what are some of your nits?
Okay, so the whole Shabbat confusion and Mary being confused about Shabbat, I don't know what I think about it, because it's almost like saying, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go try to decorate the Christmas tree, but I really don't know what I'm doing. Like, if this is something that the entire community does every single week for centuries, and that is like the cornerstone of their identity of who they are, like, even if you don't practice Shabbat, or you end up eating your meal like on the street with a dog, like Matthew did, like, you know what Shabbat means, and then it just goes downhill from there. Like, some of those details were just like, it's all over the place. So
the commentary that I read, or that I watched, which is the director talking to a Catholic scholar, Jewish scholar, and evangelical scholar. The Jewish scholar was like, how to do Shabbat is like the only thing she would have learned in that time and place. Like, the only education for a Jewish woman is how to keep a Jewish house. And so he's like, that's like the one factor she actually knows in the world is how to do Shabbat. So I don't know.
Yeah, so she's totally clueless, but remember, she can read and
Her dad taught her.
Anyway, so some of those elements that pop up on that in that conversation in her house, there is a chair. There is an empty chair, and she says, well, isn't it like for Elijah? My mommy used to do it, so I did it. And I was like, what on earth? So
that would be like the pastor being like, oh yeah, I just put a little baby Jesus in a manger. It's a Sunday.
Yeah, it's a Sunday. Or like, oh, I invited you to my Thanksgiving dinner, but I also have like fireworks, and everybody's supposed to wear like a t-shirt with American flag on it. Am I confusing holidays? Like,
and we're wearing rabbit ears and cracking eggs on each other's heads. I mean, we're all over the place.
So Elijah's chair. And by the way, when she gets corrected and they tell her, oh no, that's for Passover, that's also incorrect. Elijah's chair is not for the Passover. So Elijah's chair is actually reserved for the prophet Elijah to be present in his spirit during the ceremony of circumcision for Jewish boys, because he is like the prophet, the authority to make sure that circumcision does happen. So that's when there is Elijah's chair. Okay. During Seder meal at Passover, they have Elijah's cup that they bless. And they also, in the end of the meal, open the door and kind of invite Elijah's spirit to come in. But that also has that meaning of Elijah is going to come and make sure that all of the males present here are circumcised. So what is she talking about? No.
So yeah,
but I kind of see what they were trying to do. So if you read New Testament, you know, there is that connection between Jesus and Elijah, because like during the transformation, you know, Elijah is there present with Jesus. So for Jesus to come and take a seat of Elijah, there is this kind of a twist.
They're making a strong artistic and theological statement that doesn't fit very well into what the historicity of that moment.
Yeah, no, they took like 3 different holidays that have nothing to do with each other and traditions and rituals and just kind of crammed them together, and
Yeah.
Mary's confused and everybody's confused.
The
So,
show creator, when acknowledging the difficulty to the rabbi with which he was speaking after the show was shot, said, what we were trying in our imagination, she's been so terrorized and traumatized by her possession that she's mixed up as a result of that long oppression. So of course this is their created, that's how they came with it, but like that rabbi said, and like you're pointing out, like that's a pretty big stretch. I mean, that's pretty, again, this is like the one thing she would have been taught as a girl is how to host Shabbat. And so
yeah, but she knows the right scripture to read. She reads from the Genesis chapter 2, the end of the creation story. So she gets the Bible part right, but she just confuses everything else.
yeah, which is,
and then the male disciples that correct her about the chair, they are also wrong because they say that's for Seder meal during Passover, and it's not.
which is a perfect transition into our deep dive. So deep dive is going into a detail that caught our ear a little bit more deeply. Zhenya, I'm going to surprise you here. I've never hosted Shabbat. I don't know how to do it. And so I Googled it. How to actually host Shabbat in case Mary comes to my house and I need to help her. I want to figure out how to do it. And so I went to myjewishlearning.com. And this is what they told us I need to do. First it says is relax. Some people are too stressed out. That's a good way to start anything. It says get your supplies together, invite your guests. And it says here are the rituals. First rituals is light candles. So have candles lit for Shabbat. We saw that in the show. The second is offer blessings to the children. We saw that in the opening scene. The folks who were gathered at, I think it was Chinnereth, may you grow up to be like Rachel, may you grow up to be like Manasseh. Like that's the blessing of the children. That's right. Next would be a song, Shalom Aleichem, which is a song that invites the ministering angels to escort, to come and be ministering at Shabbat at the table. Then there would be a second song, a Shet Chayil, which is the Woman of Valor song we saw sung a couple times in the show. It's a reference to Proverbs 31, Hebrew Bible text about a woman of valor. So it's that put in song. It's usually sung to a maternal figure in the family as appreciation, and it's a song of praise within the family. Again, that some of the research I have shows began in the 17th century. So that meaning it's about 2,700 years out of place and when it first took place, but what's a couple thousand years when you're, working on it. Then is the Kiddush, which is a blessing over the wine. That's the actual beginning of Shabbat. Shabbat begins at the Kiddush. And then there's a hand washing ceremony. There's the Chamatzi, when there's a blessing of the bread and the blessing of the food. We saw some pieces of that in these rituals and the readings that we're seeing at our different Shabbats in and out. The readings of the liturgy were readings of scripture. We're seeing piece of that. There's after the meal, there'll be a grace afterwards, the Birkat Hamazon, which is a grace after the meal. It's supposed to grace before meal, like the most common in our tradition. And then there's something called Zimmerat, which is sitting around and singing. So sitting around and enjoying time singing special Shabbat songs. So Zhenya, I know you may have forgotten how to host a Shabbat dinner. I know I certainly have. So that was my deep dive. How do I actually do it? As far as foods go, something nice, a little nicer than normal everyday meal. Some challah bread and some wine is key. And it's a beautiful Friday night ritual. So that was my deep dive. How do I actually host Shabbat? You already got into some of your deep dive with the Hasmoneans. Zhenya, do you have any other deep dives that caught your ear?
No, you nailed it. I mean, you are like way above Mary's skills. So.
Yeah, because I have Google. I mean, and as long as that one
Google, so yeah, I guess we can.
As long as that one website is right, then I'm ready to go. But if it's not, then I'm in big trouble. Okay, so you got two preachers on the line here. Anytime we encounter this stuff, we're looking for good news. What is good news that can be proclaimed? How can we share this in a message? What is happening in this show that speaks to the heart of the people that we know and we love and we minister to? Zhenya, when you watched this episode, is there anything in here that you saw that and go, that will preach?
Yeah. So the fact that Shabbat is, the remembrance of God, God's act, a reminder that God is present, God is at work, God the Creator is with us. and then having Jesus walk into the most humble, the most confused Shabbat meal that is offered in town, because we have some others. So I think that, and then when Mary tells him, well, now since you are here, you do it. I can't do it when you are here. And he tells her, no, like, go ahead. And he's just enjoying it, like by the winks and by the smiles, like he is enjoying seeing this very simple way of worshiping. And but very sincere and so meaningful to her. Like, you can tell how meaningful it is that she was able to put it together. She invited people in. And that is the Shabbat that Jesus attends.
Zhenya, you stole mine.
Did I?
Yeah, no. So there's a lot of elements there that stick out. Yeah, one, this is not the regal. I mean, the rich Shabbat. This is the one with blind people and physically disabled people and people who are outcast in some way. But the thing that really stuck out to me was that of course, if Jesus would lead Shabbat, he'd do a better job. It'd be quote unquote higher quality worship in every way. And yet his great joy is not doing that. His great joy is in seeing Mary grow and seeing Mary have a chance, and see Mary's feeble offering is to him something that he celebrates and lifts up. And one of the commentaries, again, with the with a rabbi the show creator was speaking to, the rabbi pointed out that would never happen. Mm-hmm. That would never actually happen. No great man of faith, no rabbi would ever be present at a Shabbat dinner and then not lead it as a woman of low status led it. And yet he also says, as a Jewish man, not even a Christian, he says, but yet that's kind of exactly who your Jesus is, isn't he? Like the way that he treats women. And he shared the story of Jesus speaking to the woman who's about to be stoned for adultery, and he gets down on her level. He comes to where she's at. He joins her where she is. This is the Jesus whose very living being is presence in that kind of way. So that's good news. And particularly for those of us who strive for perfection, who are always looking to be great, those people who carry those kind of weights on their shoulders, what a good news that is, that just to see Jesus be graciously present in that way. So final segment, our conclusion, the wow moment, the thing that's going to stick with us as this episode fades away and we get ready for episode 3 next week. My wow moment is a statement that Mary made, and she's speaking to Nicodemus, and she says this, and I wrote it down. She says, I don't understand it myself, but here is what I can tell you. I was one way, and now I am completely different, and the thing that happened in between was him. Oh, that'll preach. That's good. Wow moment. Oh, I don't even understand it myself. And that's so key. I don't understand. She said, I've experienced transformation. I don't understand. But between I was the way I was, and I'm now, and the thing that I'm completely different, and the thing that happened in between was him. And we see real transformation in people's lives. We see real transformation in our own lives. Sometimes it's lightning fast, sometimes it's over time. But the thing that happens in between was him, and seeing someone who's been healed say that without knowing his name, without understanding his purpose, but just experiencing his power and presence. That's my wow moment, and that's going to stick with me. Any wow moments for you, Zhenya?
My wow moment is much less emotionally charged, but I'm an
emotional guy.
I really connected with Matthew's character when he is eating his Shabbat meal by himself after attempting to join his family. But then I think he saw his father. That's what I interpreted.
That's what it looked like. Yeah, that's how I interpreted it as well.
And he chooses to eat on the street. And, this is the first time we see this side of his character, this vulnerability and brokenness. Because before that, he is a tax collector. He does confront the Romans, and we know that there is pain in that character, but that scene was like laser focused on that pain. And it just was
Yeah.
really powerful to me to see him eating that meal all by himself in
It
the
was
dark.
so painful.
You know, there is no candles, there is no blessings, nobody is reading, nobody's gonna be singing and leisurely hanging out after the meal. Like all of that, he does not have. And they just kind of showed it in those few seconds. That was
Yeah, he's got riches, he has access to power, and at the end of the day, he is with the dogs. And, you know, we have Bibles. We know where Simon's story is headed. We know where Matthew's story is headed. And getting to see some of their pain, getting to see some of their trappedness, getting to see some of their lostness just sets the stage for what they will experience
yeah.
in episodes to come. And that is where we end, friends. That is the end of our recap, the Chosen After Show on episode 2. Thank you so much for watching with us again this week. Again, I'm Lance Marshall. That's Zhenya Gurina. We're pastors at the First United Methodist Church of Fort Worth. Share the Chosen with your friends. Share your thoughts with us. Comment to us on Facebook. Love to hear what you have to say. Love to hear what's impacting you. I want to know, what's your wow moment? What's your surprising thing? These are our segments. What sticks out? Something surprising. Things to know. Deep dive. That'll preach. Wow moment. Let us know what you have to say and watch episode 3. We will be back next week at 8 o'clock. Friends, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. And we will be back with you soon. Take care, everybody.